The city of Portland, Oregon is proposing an 80-20 split with the drivers. So the drivers get 80% and the apps get 20%. And I think this is a terrible idea. A terrible idea. Hi, my name is Levi Spires. This is the Tip You in the App Daily Drive podcast. Today's Daily Drive podcast is brought to you by the Gig You app. I get it. I'm not saying that the apps are taking too little or whatever. That's not my point. But I don't think government will solve this problem. And I want to show you the math. I want to give you the economics behind it. But first, let me at least read to you what I found on this proposed law. And I'll kind of just go through this article really quickly. So Portland lawmakers are pursuing a measure they hope will boost wages. They hope will boost wages by restricting how much the ride-hailing companies can collect on passenger trips. Those companies fiercely oppose the proposal and warn it could trigger a bigger increase in prices. And I'm going to show you how that works. Uber says it might even leave the city altogether, which I don't believe is the case. But the article goes on to talk about it. The article I found was in Oregon Live. It was written March 17th, and the authors were Shane Kavanaugh and Mike Rogoway. It's interesting, but basically the proposed law by this counselor, I don't know, I think Steve Novak, but they said that after fees, so the fare is going to be something, then there's going to be the fees like taxes and et cetera. And then from there, the split should be 80-20. So basically a split 80-20 of the profit after the fees like insurances and taxes and et cetera. Now, why do I think this is a bad idea? Well, there's already been proof. There was an article at KUOW. It's an NPR network thing. The title, I'm not going to read the whole article, but it's really funny. It says, Seattle's gig worker law was supposed to boost pay, and it did at first until orders dropped. And that's the real crux of the problem. When prices are increased, what do we do as consumers? We choose not to buy as much. And that's what I want to show you in the economics behind this. So first, let's kind of go through the example math here. Today, let's say roughly half of the fare goes to the driver and the other half goes to fees and the apps. So the fare is $30 in my example. Taxes and fees are $7.50. So that balance, the $22.50, is going to be split between the driver and the app. So in this example, the driver gets $15 and Uber profits $7.50 for their service fee. Now, that's a 50-50 split. Like I get $15 of the $30 fare in that example. But the proposed 80% is 80% of the profit after those expenses. So a $30 fare would go $7.50 still in taxes. The balance is still $22.50, but I get $18. That's 80% of the $22.50. And that means Uber's profit's going to go from $7.50 down to $4.50. And we, as drivers, I feel like, yeah, take that, Uber. But they're not going to take that. Nobody's going to take less money. In fact, they're going to just find a way to still get their $7.50 because that's what they wanted. That's the profit they're trying to go for. And that's logical and reasonable for a company to try to maximize their profit. I'm not saying the way they're doing it is right, but they still need to get their profitability, or their stock is going to drop in price, and then slowly over time the company's going out of business. They have to maintain a profit. So what's going to happen is this, and it's a little bit convoluted math to work backwards here, but you have to start with the $7.50. That's the baseline Uber is thinking about. They made $7.50 before, and they want to make $7.50 again on this trip. So what does that mean? The balance, 20%, $7.50 is 20% of what? Well, $37.50. And then the driver is going to get $30, which is great. I feel like, oh, my revenue doubled. That's amazing. I'm excited about that. Taxes and fees are going to go up to $12.50, and the fare went from $30 to $50. Now this is just an example, and there's a lot of ways for it to work out, but that's the real basic math behind this whole proposal. Is that there are still going to be taxes and fees, and those taxes and fees are typically based off of the fare itself. And then from there, it's going to whittle its way back down. Let's look at a real example though, not just one trip, but like basically over an entire week. The week of February 23rd through March 2nd, let's go through my numbers. My earnings were $643, which were 49%. That's where I came up with that 50%. So passengers paid $1,314 and I got $643. I got less than half, which again, I'm telling you, I agree. That is frustrating as heck to me. I'm like, that's why I'm doing a big chunk of the work. And by the way, out of that 643, I still got to pay for my expenses of my car and everything else. So that's the problem. Taxes were $84, 6%. The commercial auto insurance was $170. The promotions were $114. So that means the discounts back to the passengers. And the Uber service fee was $300. They made it 23% of the total amount of the 1314. So let's kind of go through it this way. So we know the passenger paid 1314, taxes are 84, commercial auto insurance was 170, promos 114. So after the fees, the balance remaining was $944. I got 643, Uber got 300, so a 68 to 32% split. Now, that's the take rate after the fees. My week though, let's say the Uber week was still going to be 80-20 though. So Uber still gets their $300 because that's what they were shooting for. They were trying to make $300. My take goes from 643 up to now $1,200. Ooh, it feels good when you see it that way, doesn't it? It feels great, but it's not going to work out this way. But that's the 80-20 split. And so you can see after fees was $1,500. The customer promos were still $114. The commercial auto, I still kept it at $170. The taxes went up because they're typically a percentage of what the passenger paid. So the passenger paid $1,900 in this scenario. So the passengers had to have a 45% price increase to cover basically giving me 80% of what's out there. Do you believe passengers are just going to say, well, let's just pay more? They're already paying a lot for an Uber or Lyft or DoorDash or whatever. Do you think they want to pay more? And that goes back to that KUOW article that I'm not going to read, but I'll link to it here. But it's like this title says, Seattle gig worker law was supposed to boost pay. It did at first until orders dropped. Basically, they found a way to say, well, gig workers should make more money. And so they mandated, they created like a minimum wage law. Well, what that did was two things. It increased prices, but it also increased supply of drivers out there in the market. And that combined will actually lead to less fares. I'm going to show you the economics behind it now. Less money to the drivers. Okay. Now, I know a lot of you have taken economics in high school or college, so this might be kind of redundant for you, but I still want to go through the basics of how a supply and demand curve work, just in case. So I created a supply and demand curve with some generic numbers on it. $100 at the top on the left of the y-axis, and then you've got 0 at the bottom. And then quantity across the bottom is 0 and 100. And the way this works is there's supply and demand. Well, if the price was 100, how many people want to pay that? Mostly 0. But if the price was almost free, almost all 100 people would want to pay. And that's why the demand curve slopes like this. Right? So if the price was 100, very few people want to pay that. But if the price was almost 0, almost everybody is willing to pay that. And that's why the curve goes like this. So as the price declines, the demand for that object, whatever it is, increases. Now, and I know the slope goes down, but that's how you see that. But now the supply goes the other way around. If the price was 100, what is the supply? Well, everybody wants to sell it at 100. If every Uber was going to pay us $100, we'd all want that, correct? But if the price was 0, none of us would take that trip. So the demand curve slopes this way and the supply curve slopes this way. And where they meet, where they intersect is called equilibrium, where price and supply and demand meet. And so that price in this example is $30, and roughly 50 Uber trips would happen for $30. That's the basics of supply and demand. What happens though when government creates an artificial price increase or a minimum wage? That's basically what they're trying to create here. Well, the $100 and 0 is still the same. The 0 and 100 across the x-axis still the same. But Now you can see that the price goes up to 50. Remember my example is 30 to 50. If the price goes up to 50, hypothetically, now the demand for the number of rides is only 25. So the demands for rides when it was a $30 price was 50, but now the demand for the ride is only 25. But remember, if the price goes from 30 to 50, the supply of drivers increases. So now there's 75 drivers out there instead of 50 trying to complete this ride. And we create a gap. That's a shortage of supply. An excess of driver supply is a better way to say it. Sorry. So that excess supply means there's just more drivers sitting out there waiting for these trips, for these more expensive trips, but there's less of these trips available. That's what happens when government creates this price, this artificial price. While it seems good, it makes me feel good. I think that's what I'm going to happen. What's actually going to happen is, yeah, I might make more on the occasional ride that I do get, but overall I'm going to make less because there's more supply of drivers out there too. So let me go through my notes here and see if this makes a little bit more sense. It's not just pay, it's supply. Too many drivers competing for the same rides. What happens is that there'll be less rides out there that are available, but more drivers out there. Ultimately, you're going to make less in a given day. It feels good to make more on the ride, but you're ultimately going to make less. And here's the real crux of the matter. You and I, as drivers, we don't get to dictate which trips are given to us. We feel like we get a choice, and we do. A trip comes in, and we can thumbs up, thumbs down, accept or decline. But Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and these apps are the ones that really know the true demand that's out there and the true supply, and they can dictate to you what trips they're going to give you. What if they don't give you any trips? What if, for whatever reason, you're not in the right area? They still have control over it. Your time is the inventory. That's the feeling that I have about rideshare. The inventory isn't the number of, or the trips that are out there that are available to you. That's kind of it, but it's really your time. And what you and I really would profit from, the best scenario for us is an abundance of people looking for trips and a shortage of drivers. That's what creates surges. And those are natural price increases. As opposed to forced price increases by the government, a natural price increase is when literally there's more people looking for rides and less drivers out there. We want those surge opportunities. What's going to happen when there aren't that many surges or any surges at all? It's going to create an imbalance in the market. And I think it's really interesting. I want to jump into this conversation a little bit about cherry picking again. Now, I'm not against cherry picking. That's not what I'm saying. I just don't think it's the right definition. It just assumes, or the right word. It just assumes there are cherries out there to be had. And I think in this scenario, it's going to make it even worse for the cherry pickers because you're going to have a limited supply. See, cherries are great, assuming there's two things that are happening. Number one, an abundance of rides. So you can sit there all day and just rides coming in and you're like, nope. And then the one that you really want comes in. It doesn't really matter how you classify what's good or bad, but you're like, that's the one that I want. But if there's all these drivers sitting out there hoping for just a basic higher pay, you're going to get less rides to choose from. And almost all those rides are going to be capped at not a cherry, but a little bit higher rate. So you're going to feel like you're going to make a little bit more, but you're going to spend more time parked. And ultimately, if you're going to work if you're just a part-time driver, it doesn't really matter. But if you're a full-time driver just sitting out there for 8 hours, imagine working 8 hours and making less money, taking less trips, but making less money. That's the other part to cherry picking that's really a challenge, is sometimes some people say that cherry picking, it's better to make $0 in revenue, profit or whatever, I'd rather make nothing than take a bad ride. And that supposes this idea of like, I'm going to go out and work 4 hours. I'm going to turn the app on. I'm going to go sit in my car parked for 4 hours and do nothing and then go home and with pride be like, well, those were all crappy rides. I've generated $0. And sometimes for some of us, it's better to take what we can get than the perfect. The perfect may not exist. And in this scenario, if you are a cherry picker, the 80/20 rule is actually going to reduce the number of cherries that are available to you. I know it's kind of conflating two things, the idea of like this 80/20 rule and cherry picking, but I think it all works together, this idea of supply and demand. And ultimately, we just don't have a lot of control over that as drivers. And the government trying to fix it for us is probably going to make it worse. It most likely will make it worse. And we can use one more example. Imagine if McDonald's, their minimum wage for a worker went up to $50, make up a crazy absurd number. And now a McDonald's hamburger costs, I don't know, $30, whatever the number is. Would you go to McDonald's? If there's other options available to you, would you go to McDonald's? Some people might, but more people would choose not to. That's what's going to happen. So this arbitrary price increase that is created by the government. And I don't know why 80/20 matters. It just sounds like a good number. It sounds fair, doesn't it? I should get 80% of that. I should. I feel like that's fair. But ultimately, what I really, really want is an abundance of demand. That'll give me more options to pick times I can drive, locations I can drive, and more trips to come in. More demand will increase. Well, there'll be lower fares out there, but it'll give me choice and variety to choose from. Less demand and a higher supply actually limits my ability to choose the trips that are going to be out there. Imagine if the government said not only McDonald's makes $50 an hour, but everybody that cooks burgers. We would all choose probably just cook our hamburgers at home or eat chicken. I don't know. That's the challenge with this problem. This doesn't justify Uber's or Lyft's or anybody else's take rate. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I feel sometimes really frustrated by it, just like everybody else. I feel like I just did all of the work and Uber ripped me off. But the government fix is only going to make things worse for us. And that's a hard thing to accept. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think government should come in and mandate a price fix? Do you think that there should be a mandatory 80/20 split, 70/30, 50/50? What do you think it should be? Or should government just stay out of it and let you and me be the adults and the entrepreneurs that we are and handle it ourselves? See where I'm going with it. Okay, this weekend, I have to admit, I have a drug. I am addicted to big bonuses. It's fun, and I like the money that I make. And yeah, for sure, I definitely like it. I'm going to do a bigger video on this coming up. But this weekend, this last week, Uber offered me almost $1,000 in bonuses. And they kind of look like this, where it says like, hey, on Saturday from 5 to 9 p.m., if you do 9 trips, you get $27. If you do 2 more trips, you're going to get $11. And 2 more, you get 13. Then 3 more, you get 20. And I just saw it as a challenge. And this was an Uber Eats challenge. So I could just do delivery. I couldn't do UberX, which is kind of boring. But I did on Saturday. I just knuckled down and I did a 12 and a half hours when it being online, knocking out trips. And I did 56 trips on Saturday, 56 deliveries. I drove about 100 miles and I ended up making, oh my gosh, let me see here. Let me look at my number here. I'll do a more thorough video on this, but I was pretty happy with it. Let's see. Oh, I don't have it up here. It's somewhere else. But I ended up generating like $560 in revenue, drove about 100 miles, do 56 trips. And it was $177 in fares. And I'll put the numbers up here so you can see if I'm right. But $177 in fare, $260 in bonuses, and like $160 in tips. It was all Uber Eats. I had a good time. in the sense that I got to listen to Project Hail Mary, the book. I've listened to it already before, but I'm going to go watch the movie later on. And I was like, let me re-listen to the book. So I just listened to the book, had the car in Tesla FSD the whole time. So every time I would pick up an order, I would just hit start button and the Tesla would drive me to the next spot because the Uber app was putting the address in. It was great. But the downside was it was pretty boring to be in the car for 12, 14 hours by myself the whole time. Yeah, but that was my weekend, and I'll do a more thorough video because I found some really interesting data sets that things like how Uber hides the tips and some other stuff. Driver Dean, he reached out, and I like that name, by the way, Driver Dean. In your level 2 accounting column, so I did an accounting analysis in my last video or last few videos. It says you're taking the standard federal mile deduction. Are you sure you can deduct the on-road electricity charging for tax purposes? You can't deduct gas expense if you're taking the $72.50. That was not a tax video. That was an accounting video. So I think sometimes when I talk accounting, drivers immediately revert to this idea of taxes. Accounting and taxes don't have to be the same thing. You can do accounting for your business one way, but when you file your taxes, you do it a different way. So my only goal with that accounting explanation that I gave in that video was if you just account for the 72 cents standard tax deduction, you're saving money. So basically money came into my account and I needed to pay myself. But before I paid myself, I took that 72 cent per mile deduction and I put it over here and I saved that money. And I saved that money for electricity, maintenance, depreciation, potentially taxes, whatever. So it wasn't a tax deduction. I just used the tax deduction as a methodology to save money as an accounting way. Hopefully that makes a little sense. Brock Landers. That's funny. If you haven't seen that movie, Boogie Nights, Brock Landers. Even's got a nice little picture of Mark Wahlberg there. Okay, I do UberX, but in a Model 3. Always clean, always smells great, and the slightest look of confusion about the door handles. I'm opening the door with a smile and a welcome. I like to hear that. That's the way it should be, regardless of what little pay this one ride gives me. I go home every night feeling good about myself, knowing that I made at least one person feel special. Hey, Brock, I love that. That's the same way that I feel. That is the same way that I feel. Yes, I would like to earn more money. I would like to earn a tip, but it's good if you are a customer service person making the customer, the passenger, feel good. I think that's one of the more rewarding things. It's kind of like the way parents treat Christmas. It's better to give a gift than to receive. So Brock, man, that brings a smile to my face, man. I totally agree. Drivers, thank you so much for watching. Hey, shout out to the sponsors, Gig U and Lace Fit and Red Tiger. Thank you so much. Check them out. Drivers, if you're looking to engage in more some of these other videos, I have a membership here called Thrive where I do exclusive videos and give you guys quick access to content. If you don't want to pay the $3, I get it. No worries at all. You're more than welcome to just join the Facebook group. Facebook group is free. It's called Tip You in the App. It's just drivers only. Check it out. For 2026, not only do I want you to make as much money as possible, I want you to be safe, healthy, and happy. I want you to enjoy the gig. I'm trying to get back to the roots of what I like about it. Chasing quests, meeting passengers. And I know it's conflicting because I want to make more money too. And not everything's perfect, but I want it to be. So I'm going to try. But I want you to be safe, healthy, and happy. And I want you to know that I'm cheering for you. Be well. Bye.